The rain tonight is the kind that doesn't fall so much as it settles, a fine, persistent mist that blurs the line between the window and the world beyond it. In my hand, the journal is cold. Not the chill of the room, but a deeper, damper cold, as if it has just been lifted from a stone shelf somewhere underground. The leather cover is water-stained, a dark bloom across the lower right corner that feels like a continent on some forgotten map. I found it 2 weeks ago, in a cardboard box at the back of an estate sale in a town whose name I've already begun to forget. The box was labeled in neat block letters, Misk Papers, 1920s. It cost me $6. You know that feeling when you inherit something from a relative, a box of old papers from an attic, a trunk of clothes from a basement? There's a solemnity to it. You're sifting through the quiet residue of a life, and then, sometimes, you find the thing that doesn't belong, the object that feels like a whisper from a room you didn't know the house had. For me, it was this journal. It was at the very bottom, beneath ledgers and bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon. The first page wasn't writing. It was a sketch, done in a frantic, precise hand with what looked like a fountain pen. It depicted a figure that my mind, even now, struggles to assemble into a whole, a vaguely humanoid shape, but with a head like a mass of feelers and great webbed wings that spread from its back in a suggestion of impossible scale. The paper around the drawing is slightly warped, as if the ink itself carried a dampness. The name stamped in flaking gold on the inside cover is Francis Wayland Thurston. When I looked it up, I found nothing. No birth record, no obituary, just a single brittle newspaper clipping from the Arkham Advertiser in the spring of 1925, mentioning that a Professor George Gamel Angel of Brown University had died suddenly. His effects, it noted, were passed to a nephew. This journal begins on March 1st, 1925, a week after the professor's funeral. I open it now, the binding cracking softly in the quiet of the room. The first entry starts not with grief, but with confusion. The writer, Thurston, notes that he has begun to experience strange dreams. Vivid, architectural dreams of sinking cities and non-Euclidean angles, dreams that began, he is certain, the very night he first handled his uncle's papers, he writes. And I'm reading his words to you now. The ink is still wet on the page, I think, from the condensation of my own unease. He was in his uncle's study in Providence. A gas lamp hissed on the desk, its light a struggling amber pool that made the shadows in the corners seem to breathe. Among the papers was a small bas-relief sculpture, about 7 inches high. He describes running his fingers over it. The clay was cold and slightly granular, like beach sand baked in a kiln, but it carried a psychic chill that seeped into his fingertips. The central figure was the one from the sketch, that squamous, tentacled horror. But it was the city carved in low relief behind the thing that held his eye. Spires and angles that defied perspective, leaning in ways stone should not lean. He writes, "To look at it for too long is to feel the floor tilt. The geometry is not wrong, it is aggressively, mockingly other." That night, the first true dream came. He describes it not as a nightmare, but as a transmission. A vast, dark place, all dripping stone and cyclopean architecture, and a sound, a chanting, rhythmic and guttural that seemed to vibrate not in his ears but in the marrow of his jaw. A language, he writes, composed of syllables that hurt the teeth to even consider, waking from a dream so vivid you can still feel it in your hands, the details clinging like cobwebs. He thought it was stress, grief, the peculiar atmosphere of a dead man's study. Then the letters began to arrive. He lists them in the journal with clinical detachment. A colleague in Buenos Aires, a noted psychiatrist, writing of an epidemic of hysterical dreams among his patients, dreams of a drowned city and a voice from the deep. An anthropologist in Oslo reporting fragments of the same chant collected from sailors in a fugue state. The dates clustered around the same weeks in early 1925. Separate continents, shared delusion. The journal entry for March 14th ends with a single, stark line. It is not a dream. It is a broadcast, and the signal is growing stronger. I stop reading. The rain outside my window now is the same steady whisper he described on that Providence night. The same hour, too. The gas lamp on his desk is a century gone, but the damp chill in his words is here, in this room, transferred from his hand to mine through ink and paper. He felt a signal strengthening across the world. I look at my own darkened computer screen, a flat black mirror. What does a signal look like now in an age of endless noise? Would we even recognize it as it reached for us, humming up from the deep places, tuning itself to the frequency of a sleeping mind? I turn the page. The paper is thicker here, a different stock, official letterhead, clumsily folded and pasted into the journal. The heading reads, New Orleans Police Department, Confidential Addendum. Inspector John R. Legrasse, November 1st, 1923. The setting shifts violently from a gaslit study to a Louisiana bayou midnight. The humidity, he writes, was a physical presence. It did not hang in the air. It lay upon it, a hot, wet wool blanket over the world. The smell was of peat and black water, of things decaying sweetly in the warm dark, and through the cypress trees, their knees rising from the ink-black water like the knuckles of buried giants, came the sound. Not a signal, a summons. Drums, a low, syncopated throb that seemed to emanate from the mud itself, and over it, a chant. The same guttural, phonemic agony from the Providence dream, but now made real by dozens of human throats. Legrasse and his men, revolvers heavy in their hands, moved toward it. The beam of his electric torch cut a frail, shaking path through hanging moss and clouds of gnats. Then, the clearing. The illustration in my mind is not of monsters, but of people, 50 or more. Men and women in tattered work clothes and faded dresses, kneeling in the sucking mire. Their faces, upturned in the torchlight, showed no frenzy, only a terrible placid vacancy. Their eyes did not reflect the fire, they seemed to absorb it, leaving only dark, wet holes. And before them, on a crude altar of cypress logs and river stone, was the idol. Legrasse describes it as 8 feet tall, of a greenish-black stone that drank the light. It was the same figure, the winged, tentacled horror, but rendered here with a crude, worshipful urgency that made it somehow more immediate than the professor's delicate bas-relief. The air around it shimmered, not with heat, but with a palpable wrongness that made the teeth ache. Here, Legrasse's clinical report fractures, his handwriting so steady before begins to cramp. He notes the sudden absolute silence that fell when the torches were revealed. Not a gasp, not a cry. The drums stopped, the chanting ceased. The insects, he writes, had gone quiet minutes before. That uncanny silence in nature when all the insects stop chirping at once, and you realize something else has been making the sound all along. The prisoners taken that night, he writes, were docile, almost cheerful. In their statements, they spoke not of fear, but of anticipation, of a great city sleeping under the Pacific, of a great dreamer who was sending dreams up through the water and the earth, preparing the way. They were not afraid, they were eager. At the bottom of the pasted-in report, in a hurried pencil scrawl that must have been added later, Legrasse appended a single line. The prisoners spoke of a city under the sea and a great dreamer waiting there. They were not afraid, they were eager. I hear my own breath in the quiet room. The eager ones, that is the part that tightens something in my throat. The horror is not that something might come, it is that something is already here, whispering, and there are those who have heard it, and they want it to wake up. The room is no longer dark. A thin gray light bleeds around the edges of my window shade. I've been here all night. The journal lies open on the desk, but my laptop screen glows beside it, a portal to a different kind of archive. I'm cross-referencing. It's what you do. You hear a story like Legrasse's, and a part of you needs to pin it to the map of the real world. I type in the date, the location, a parish in Louisiana, November 1923. The search feels absurd. What am I looking for? Police raid on cosmic cult? But the archive yields something, not much. A digitized clipping from a New Orleans paper, 3 paragraphs buried on page 7, local disturbance in the bayou. It mentions a police action, several individuals detained, attributing the incident to illicit moonshine operations and associated superstitious fervor. The date is exact. The dismissive tone is a perfect, brittle shell over the truth. It's that specific modern dread. Googling something obscure late at night and finding one forum post from years ago that confirms your unease. The official record is a lid on a pot that is still boiling. I rub my eyes. The morning light feels cold, invasive. I turn back to the journal, to the tangible proof in my hands. The page after Legrasse's report is not written on. Something is pasted there. It's another clipping, this one from a maritime gazette. The paper is brittle, yellowed like old bone. The headline, "Sailor Vanishes After Harrowing Pacific Voyage." A Norwegian seaman, Gustav Johansen. This sole survivor of a trading schooner found adrift. The article is vague, citing exposure and delirium. But below it, in the journal writer's own hand, now shaky, the ink blotted is a note, Johansen. The Emma. He saw it. He told his wife in Copenhagen before he disappeared. He said they found a city that was not a city, and a door that was not a door, and something that stirred behind it. My fingers are cold, the eager ones in the swamp, the dreaming professor in Providence. And now a sailor on the other side of the world running from a door. The connections are not lines on a map, they are cracks, and something is pressing up through all of them at once. I turn the page. The brittle clipping gives way to Johansen's own words, written in a cramped seaman's hand on the blank pages that follow. It's not a formal log, it's a confession, scrawled in fits and starts, the ink sometimes fading as if the pen had run dry from fear. He describes the dawn, the South Pacific, a place of endless blue, gone utterly still, no wind, no current. The sea was a sheet of polished lead under a sickly yellow sky, and there, where the charts showed only abyssal plain, something breached the surface. It was not an island, he stresses this. It was architecture. A sprawl of greenish-black stone, slick with weed and dripping with a brine that did not smell of the sea. Angles met in ways that made the eyes water. Towers leaned without falling. Doorways yawned where walls should have been solid. You know that feeling, seeing impossible architecture in a dream, staircases that lead nowhere, and feeling your own mind strain and slip trying to process it. This was that made stone. The crew of the Alert stood frozen at the rail. The silence was absolute, a physical pressure. Then, from deep within that non-Euclidean mass, a sound began. A low, rhythmic thrum that vibrated up through the ship's hull, through the deck, into the bones of their feet. It was not a machine. It was organic. A heartbeat from a chest the size of a mountain. Johansen writes that they anchored. He doesn't say why. What madness of curiosity, what pull made them throw the hook near that shore? One sailor, a young man from Oslo named Eriksson, reached out as their small boat nudged the slime-covered stone. He didn't speak. He just laid his bare palm against it. The journal entry reads, Eriksson touched it. His mouth opened. The sound he began to make was not a scream. Not at first. It was a recognition. Then it became a scream. And then it was cut, as if the air itself had been sliced. I stop reading. My own breath feels loud in the quiet of my room. The morning light hasn't warmed a thing. I turn the page. The next entry is dated later that same day, written in Johansen's cabin. The smell, he writes, had seeped into the ship. Not just salt and rot, but something older. The scent of opened graves that have been underwater for millennia, mixed with the metallic tang of deep ocean trenches where light never goes. They had fled back to the alert, but the thing in the water did not pursue. It waited, and then the stone city began to open, not a door sliding aside, a sound like the world's fabric tearing, like a continent of glass shattering in slow motion. And from that wrong geometry a shape ascended. Johansen does not describe a monster. He describes a failure, his own mind's refusal to hold what it was seeing, a suggestion of a head crowned with something like feelers, wings too vast for any sky, folded from a substance that was neither membrane nor scale, a bulk that warped the light and the water around it. The horror was not in teeth or claws, it was in the profound, soul-crushing alienness of it, the understanding that this was not a beast, but a god, and it was awake. There is a moment in any horror story where you have to put the book down and turn on all the lights. Not because of what was described, but because of what wasn't. Because the writer's language broke. Johansen's does. His sentences fracture into fragments of sensation, the color that was no color, the chanting that was now inside his skull, the way the sea itself seemed to bow away from the thing's form. His final sentence is written in a shockingly steady hand, alone in the center of a page. The geometry of the world is wrong. It has always been wrong. I close the journal. The leather is warm now from my hands. The rain has stopped outside my window, leaving a silence that feels borrowed, temporary. I look at the closed cover, this little rectangle of stained hide, and I understand it is not a book. It is a door, and I have just held it open. The journal doesn't end there. There are a few loose pages tucked in the back, like an afterthought. Newspaper clippings, brittle and yellowed. The official story. Johansen was found weeks later, adrift on the alert, the sole survivor. He never spoke again. The doctors called it profound shock, a maritime trauma. He died in a sanitarium, staring at walls only he could see. Inspector Legrasse's report was filed, classified and forgotten. The Louisiana incident was officially attributed to toxic swamp gases, causing mass hallucination among illicit distillers. A tidy chemical explanation for the chanting in the dark. And the writer of this journal, his name appears in a brief society column from 1926, a noted professor and antiquarian lost at sea during a research voyage, presumed drowned, no body recovered. I lay the clippings flat on my desk. This is the silence after the scream. The world's machinery grinding on, producing plausible, empty answers. It's the feeling you get reading a news article about a mystery that was solved with an answer that explains nothing, and knowing you'll never get the real story. The truth is too large, too wrong. It gets filed away. Outside my window, the street is dark and quiet. The rain has left the pavement gleaming under the lone street lamp, a perfect empty mirror. No stars, just the deep, patient black of a clear night sky. So here is what we are left with. A missing man, a mad sailor, a buried police report, and a clay bas-relief, probably sitting in a university storage crate somewhere, labeled primitive cult object. The door is closed. The journal is just a book again. But you understand now, don't you? The geometry of the world is wrong. It has always been wrong. We just build our little houses on top of the cracks and call them solid ground. Sleep well. The ocean is very far away, and whatever is down there has been down there for a very long time, and it is patient, and it can wait. The silence in the room now is different. It's the hum of the house settling, the faint electric breath of my laptop asleep on the desk. The journal is just a closed rectangle of leather and paper, a tangible weight, but it feels like an anchor, holding me to a story that ended a century ago. The writer's dreams stopped. That's the last thing he noted. A week before he booked his final voyage, the oppressive global nightmare that had haunted artists and sensitive minds for months, it just ceased, like a fever breaking. He thought it was over. We know it wasn't over. It was waiting. The city is still down there, in that stretch of the South Pacific where the depth charts contradict each other, where one map shows a trench 2 miles deep and another shows a submerged plateau. The cartographers blame sonar ghosts, magnetic anomalies. They don't talk about angles. That's the true shape of this dread. It's the comfort of being safe in your bed while a storm rages outside, undercut by the slow, cold knowledge that the storm isn't raging. It's resting, gathering, and it will come again. I turn off the lamp. The room is lit only by the residual glow of the street lamp, casting long, distorted rectangles across the floor. The geometry of the room feels temporary, like a sketch over something far more permanent. So we end where we began, with you in the dark listening. The story is told, the evidence is laid out, all the official answers are given, and all of them are lies. The only truth is the waiting. Sleep well. The ocean is very far away, and whatever is down there has been down there for a very long time, and it is patient, and it can wait.